The phenomenon of missing time, or the elapsing of time without the subject being aware or having any memory of the event, is commonly associated with alien abduction, but players of turn-based strategy games like XCOM and Civilization will be all too familiar with the sensation. The Creative Assembly's Total War series has spent nearly 2 decades refining their ability to induce this phenomenon in players, and their latest game, Total War Warhammer 2, is no exception. The second game in the Warhammer Fantasy turn-based / real-time strategy hybrid isn't as much an overhaul of the first as it is a series of refinements, which makes sense given the relatively small amount of time between the two. The biggest change comes in the form of the game's campaign. While the previous game had an obtuse conquer this territory objective, the sequel is much more structured, with a single overall objective and checkpoints spread out along the way. Narratively speaking, there's a magical vortex, which all of the factions are vying for control of. In order to do so, each faction must collect enough resources to enact a series of rituals, the last of which will grant that faction control and a victory. While the race to control the vortex can be daunting at first, it becomes apparent over time that the campaign is very forgiving, even on higher difficulties, allowing players to lose the race but still win the game. The 4 new factions are distinct from those of the first game, and among themselves, both in flavor and mechanically. This keeps things interesting on repeat playthroughs and in the multiplayer. The other changes are much less substantial, but still appreciated. The tutorial is longer and more in-depth, the UI has been streamlined for more ease of use, and hero characters are much less annoying on the campaign map. The multiplayer has seen the least amount of changes, with the same bare-bones offering the first game had. It's sparse compared to something like Total War Shogun 2, but the essence is still there. There's also the promise of the upcoming release of the Mortal Empires campaign, which combines the maps of the first and second games for those who own both. The size and scope are impressive, and it's a nice reward for series fans who need to lose more of their free time. Total War Warhammer 2 may not be a massive overhaul of the franchise, but it is a refinement of a game that was already good. The new armies, better structured campaign, and various tweaks serve to improve upon that which came before. The multiplayer could have used a little more love, but it's certainly not worse than the last game. Ultimately, Total War Warhammer 2 is as good a way as any to lose a few dozen hours, and with the promise of an even bigger campaign for owners of both games, it's set to have players wondering where even more of their time went.